The story of why God blessed Ishmael is deeply rooted in the narrative of the book of Genesis and in the life of his father Abraham, a man whose faith and obedience shaped the course of spiritual history. When many readers in the United States approach the story of Abraham, their attention is often drawn toward the covenant line that continues through Isaac, yet within the same text there exists a powerful declaration that reveals God's mercy extending beyond a single lineage. This declaration appears in Genesis 17, where God speaks directly to Abraham about his sons and his future. Abraham, deeply concerned for Ishmael, expresses a heartfelt desire that Ishmael might live under God's blessing. In response, God confirms that the covenant will indeed be established through Isaac. Yet immediately follows that statement with a promise regarding Ishmael. God declares that he has heard Abraham's prayer concerning Ishmael and that he will bless him, make him fruitful, multiply him exceedingly, and that he will father 12 princes and become a great nation. This passage stands as one of the most significant yet often overlooked verses in the entire Abrahamic narrative. It shows clearly that divine blessing is not limited to covenant designation. Ishmael is not the bearer of the covenant in the Genesis narrative, but he is undeniably the recipient of divine favor. The phrase God uses carries strength and intention. The blessing is not vague or symbolic. It is concrete, involving growth, leadership, and the formation of nations. The mention of 12 princes is particularly striking because it mirrors the structure later seen in the 12 tribes descending from Isaac's lineage through Jacob. This parallel suggests that Ishmael's descendants were recognized as organized and significant communities within the biblical worldview. The blessing of Ishmael therefore reflects the broader promise given to Abraham at the beginning of his journey that he would become the father of many nations. This promise unfolds in more than one direction. Isaac represents the covenant line tied to the land of Canaan and the unfolding narrative of Israel. Ishmael represents another branch through which nations emerge, fulfilling the promise of multiplication and expansion. The blessing given to Ishmael demonstrates that God's care is not restricted by human expectations of lineage or status. It reflects a divine generosity that extends to all who are connected to Abraham's story. The narrative continues to reinforce this theme in Genesis 21, when Hagar and Ishmael find themselves in the wilderness after being sent away. The situation appears desperate. Water runs out and hope fades. Hagar places the boy under a shrub and steps away, unable to watch his suffering. In that moment, the text describes a profound act of divine compassion. God hears the voice of the boy. An angel calls to Hagar and reassures her that Ishmael will live and that he will become a great nation. A well appears, providing water and restoring life. This moment is not simply a rescue, it is a confirmation of the promise spoken earlier. The blessing declared in Genesis 17 begins to take visible form. Ishmael survives, grows, and thrives under divine protection. The repetition of the phrase God heard carries deep significance. The name Ishmael itself means God hears. The story therefore becomes a living expression of that name. The cry of the child is not ignored. It reaches heaven and heaven responds. For readers across generations, this moment has become a powerful symbol of hope. It suggests that even in isolation and despair, divine awareness remains present. When examining why God blessed Ishmael, it becomes clear that the answer lies in both promise and compassion. Ishmael is blessed because he is Abraham's son and because Abraham's prayers for him are heard. The blessing also reflects God's character, a character that extends mercy beyond human boundaries. In the Quran, this theme is echoed in a different yet complementary way. Ishmael is described as a prophet, patient and devoted to prayer, someone who enjoined righteousness upon his family. Islamic tradition honors him as a figure of obedience and faith and places him alongside Abraham in the establishment of worship in Mecca. According to this tradition, Abraham and Ishmael raised the foundations of the Kaaba, dedicating it to the worship of one God. This perspective emphasizes not only Ishmael's blessing, but also his active role in continuing Abraham's mission. While the Bible focuses on his survival and his descendants, the Quran highlights his spiritual leadership. Together, these perspectives reveal a figure who is both historically and spiritually significant. In American discussions of the Abrahamic narrative, the focus on Isaac as the covenant heir sometimes leads to the impression that Ishmael stands outside of God's favor. Yet the biblical text itself does not support the conclusion. The blessing of Ishmael is stated clearly and fulfilled visibly. His descendants become numerous, forming tribes that spread across desert regions. Genesis records their names and territories, acknowledging their presence within the world of the ancient Near East. These details demonstrate that Ishmael's legacy was recognized and preserved within the biblical tradition. The distinction between covenant and blessing is crucial for understanding this narrative. Covenant refers to a specific line through which certain promises unfold within the biblical story. Blessing, however, is broader. It encompasses growth, protection, and the flourishing of life. Ishmael may not carry the covenant in Genesis, but he fully participates in the blessing promised to Abraham. This distinction allows the text to affirm both Isaac's unique role and Ishmael's honored place within God's plan. The story also reveals the power of a father's concern. Abraham's plea for Ishmael shows deep love and responsibility. He does not see his son as secondary. He desires that Ishmael live under divine care. God's response affirms that this concern is heard and answered. The blessing of Ishmael, therefore, becomes a testimony to the value of intercession. It shows that prayers offered in sincerity can shape the course of events. For modern readers, especially in a diverse society like the United States, the story of Ishmael carries important lessons about inclusion and perspective. It challenges narrow interpretations that limit divine care to a single group. It encourages a broader understanding of how blessing can extend across different peoples and histories. Ishmael's life demonstrates that those who may seem outside a central narrative are still within the reach of divine mercy. The wilderness scene reinforces this lesson in a powerful way. The place of apparent abandonment becomes the place of encounter with God. The well that appears in the desert symbolizes provision in the most unlikely circumstances. This image has inspired countless reflections on faith, reminding readers that hope can emerge even in moments of despair. Ishmael's story therefore resonates far beyond its ancient setting. It speaks to anyone who has felt overlooked, displaced, or uncertain about their future. The biblical affirmation that God hears the voice of the boy becomes a universal message that no cry goes unnoticed. When tracing the historical impact of Ishmael's descendants, scholars note the development of tribes that inhabited vast regions of Arabia. These communities contributed to trade, culture, and the movement of ideas across continents. Over time, traditions linking these tribes to Ishmael became part of a broader narrative connecting Abraham's legacy to the Arabian world. In Islamic understanding, this connection reaches its fullest expression in the emergence of a global faith centered on monotheism. The figure of Ishmael therefore bridges different traditions, serving as a link between biblical history and later religious developments. His blessing is not confined to a single moment. It unfolds across centuries, shaping communities and influencing civilizations. The verse in Genesis that declares his blessing stands as a reminder that divine plans often extend beyond immediate expectations. What may appear as a secondary line can become a major path in the unfolding of history. For American audiences exploring the Bible with fresh attention, recognizing this verse invites a deeper appreciation of the text. It reveals that the narrative of Abraham is richer and more expansive than often assumed. Ishmael is not forgotten within Scripture. He is named, blessed, protected, and remembered. His life reflects both the complexity of human relationships and the constancy of divine care. In the end, the question of why God blessed Ishmael finds its answer in the very nature of the promise given to Abraham and in the character of God as presented in Scripture. The promise was never limited to one outcome. It was a promise of multiplication of nations and a blessing that would extend across the earth. Ishmael stands as one of the clearest expressions of that promise fulfilled, a son whose name reminds the world that God hears and whose story continues to echo through history as a testament to mercy, provision, and the expansive reach of divine blessing. As the reflection deepens, the blessing of Ishmael begins to reveal a pattern that runs consistently through the book of Genesis and the wider Abrahamic tradition, a pattern that shows divine care reaching beyond human expectations and social boundaries. The life of Abraham is often remembered as the beginning of a covenant story, yet it is equally the beginning of a global human story in which multiple nations emerge from one family. This dual dimension becomes especially clear when examining how God speaks about Ishmael. The promise given is not hesitant or secondary. It is deliberate, repeated, and fulfilled across time. God declares that Ishmael will be fruitful, multiplied, and established as a great nation. These words carry the same tone of certainty that characterizes the promises given elsewhere in the narrative. They show that Ishmael's future is not an afterthought, but an intentional part of the unfolding plan. When readers in the modern world revisit this passage, especially those in the United States who are accustomed to hearing primarily about Isaac, the realization can be striking. The Bible itself affirms Ishmael's significance in clear and unmistakable terms. The idea that Ishmael was somehow outside of divine favor does not align with the text. Instead, the text portrays him as a recipient of blessing whose life demonstrates resilience, growth, and purpose. This becomes even more evident in the wilderness narrative, where Ishmael's survival is directly connected to divine intervention. The desert setting amplifies the intensity of the moment. It is a place where human resources are exhausted and where survival depends entirely on provision that cannot be controlled. In that setting, the voice of the boy is heard and help arrives. The appearance of the well transforms the situation completely. It is not merely a physical rescue. It is a sign that the promise spoken earlier remains active and effective. The blessing is not abstract. It takes form in real circumstances, preserving life and opening the path toward the future that has been declared. The meaning of Ishmael's name continues to resonate in this context. God hears is not just a statement. It becomes a lived reality that defines his identity and his story. This theme of being heard carries deep spiritual significance. It suggests that divine awareness is not limited by location, status, or circumstance. Even in isolation, even in moments of abandonment, the human voice can reach God. This idea has profound implications for readers across cultures and generations. It offers reassurance that no situation is beyond the reach of divine attention. The blessing of Ishmael also highlights an important distinction that often goes unnoticed. The covenant through Isaac establishes a specific line within the biblical narrative, yet the blessing given to Ishmael demonstrates that divine generosity extends far beyond that line. This distinction allows the text to hold two truths at the same time. Isaac carries the covenant that shapes the story of Israel. Ishmael carries a blessing that leads to the formation of nations. Both roles are meaningful. Both are part of the promise given to Abraham. Understanding this balance prevents a narrow reading of the text and opens the door to a more comprehensive view of the Abrahamic story. In the Quran, this broader view is reflected in the way Ishmael is presented as a figure of faith and obedience. He is described as truthful in his promise and devoted to prayer, a person who encouraged righteousness within his family. This portrayal complements the biblical narrative by emphasizing the spiritual dimension of Ishmael's life. In Islamic tradition, his role expands further as he is associated with the origins of worship in Mecca alongside Abraham. Together, they are remembered for raising the foundations of the Kaaba, dedicating as a place of monotheistic devotion. This perspective reinforces the idea that Ishmael's life was not only blessed in terms of descendants, but also in terms of spiritual legacy. The convergence of these traditions shows how a single figure can carry significance across different faiths, each preserving aspects of a shared heritage. For audiences in America, where conversations about religion often intersect with of identity and coexistence, the story of Ishmael offers a meaningful point of reflection. It challenges assumptions that limit divine blessing to one group and invites a broader understanding of how sacred history unfolds. The presence of Ishmael within the biblical narrative encourages readers to recognize that the promise to Abraham was expansive from the very beginning. It was a promise that envisioned the emergence of multiple peoples, each with their own path yet connected by a common origin. The genealogies recorded in Genesis provide further evidence of this expansion. Ishmael's descendants are listed as leaders of tribes, each with their own territory and identity. These details are not incidental. They serve to document the fulfillment of the promise that he would become a great nation. Over time, these tribes contributed to the cultural and historical development of the Arabian region. They became part of the networks that connected different parts of the ancient world through trade and communication. This historical dimension adds depth to the biblical statement of blessing. It shows that the promise was realized not only in spiritual terms but also in tangible social and cultural developments. The narrative of Ishmael also carries an enduring emotional resonance. It speaks to experiences of displacement, uncertainty, and survival. The moment in the wilderness, where hope seems to fade and then is restored, reflects a universal human journey. People across different backgrounds can see in Ishmael's story a reflection of their own struggles and hopes. The assurance that God hears becomes a source of comfort and strength. It suggests that even when circumstances appear overwhelming, there remains a possibility of renewal and continuation. This message has made the story of Ishmael relevant far beyond its original setting. It continues to inspire reflection and discussion among those who seek to understand the deeper meanings within the Abrahamic tradition. As the narrative moves toward its conclusion, Ishmael's presence remains significant. He is not erased from the story. He appears again alongside Isaac at the burial of Abraham, standing together as sons honoring their father. This moment carries symbolic weight. It shows that despite the separation and different paths taken, both sons remain connected to their origin. It is a reminder that the branches of Abraham's family, though distinct, share a common root. This image offers a powerful reflection for modern readers. It suggests that differences in lineage or tradition do not erase the deeper connection that exists at the beginning. The blessing of Ishmael, therefore, becomes more than a historical detail. It becomes a lens through which the entire Abrahamic story can be viewed with greater depth and clarity. It reveals a narrative that is inclusive in its scope, generous in its promises, and enduring in its impact. Ishmael stands as a witness to the truth that divine blessing can extend beyond the boundaries that humans often draw. His life, preserved in Scripture and remembered across traditions, continues to speak to the expansive nature of the promise given to Abraham, a promise that reaches across nations, generations, and histories, shaping the spiritual landscape of the world in ways that continue to unfold even today. As the narrative reaches its final depth, the blessing of Ishmael stands as a powerful testimony to the expansive nature of divine mercy, a mercy that flows through the life of Abraham and extends far beyond what many readers initially expect when engaging with the book of Genesis. The story does not present a narrow vision of favor limited to a single path. Instead, it reveals a wider horizon in which multiple destinies unfold under the same divine promise. The blessing given to Ishmael becomes one of the clearest examples of this reality. It shows that while the covenant continues through Isaac, the reach of God's care is not confined to that covenant line. Ishmael's life becomes living proof that divine generosity cannot be restricted by human assumptions about importance. The words spoken over him in Genesis carry a certain generations. He will multiply. He will become a great nation. These declarations are not symbolic language. Statements that take in the communities, preservation time. When we read Ishmael's descendants, they begin to see God's promise unfold beyond the images of Scripture. The genealogies recorded in Genesis serve as the first sign of fulfillment. Listed tribes are identified, are recognized. Details reflect the world in which Ishmael's lineage has already begun to take form as a structured and influential presence. Over centuries, these early tribes develop into communities that inhabit vast regions of Arabia, contributing to the cultural and historical landscape of the ancient world. Trade routes, social networks, and cultural exchanges all become part of this unfolding story. The blessing spoken in a single verse expands into a wide historical reality that touches multiple civilizations. This expansion highlights an essential truth about the nature of divine promises. They often begin with a simple declaration and then grow across time in ways that exceed immediate understanding. Ishmael's story demonstrates that what may appear as a secondary thread within a narrative can become a major current in the broader flow of history. His life invites readers to look beyond initial impressions and to recognize the deeper patterns within the text. In the Quran, this broader pattern is affirmed through the portrayal of Ishmael as a figure of righteousness and devotion. He is remembered not only as a recipient of blessing, but as an active participant in the continuation of Abraham's mission. His association with the building of the Kaaba alongside Abraham adds a spiritual dimension that complements the historical narrative found in Genesis. In this tradition, Ishmael is not only a father of nations, but also a builder of sacred space, a contributor to the establishment of monotheistic worship that continues to shape the lives of millions. This perspective reinforces the idea that his blessing includes both material and spiritual elements. It extends from the formation of tribes to the foundation of religious practice. For readers in the modern United States, where engagement with religious texts often involves rediscovering familiar stories with new insight, the example of Ishmael offers a meaningful opportunity to reconsider long-held assumptions. The verse that declares his blessing stands quietly within Genesis, Yet its implications are vast. It challenges the tendency to view the Abrahamic narrative through a single lens. It encourages a more comprehensive understanding in which multiple lines of promise and fulfillment coexist. This broader view does not diminish the significance of Isaac's role. Instead, it enriches the overall narrative by showing that divine purpose operates on more than one level at the same time. The emotional dimension of Ishmael's story remains one of its most powerful aspects. The image of a child in the wilderness facing the limits of human endurance resonates deeply with anyone who has experienced moments of fear or uncertainty. The response that follows, the hearing of his voice and the provision of water, transforms that moment into a symbol of hope. It reminds readers that even in the most difficult circumstances, there is a possibility of renewal. This theme continues to speak across cultures and generations, offering reassurance that divine care is present even when it is not immediately visible. The meaning of Ishmael's name continues to echo through this narrative. God here becomes more than a description. It becomes a declaration that defines the relationship between the human and the divine. It affirms that no cry is too small, no situation too distant for God's attention. This idea carries profound significance in a world where many people struggle with feelings of isolation or invisibility. Ishmael's story stands as a reminder that being heard is a fundamental part of the human experience and that divine awareness encompasses every voice. As the narrative concludes, the image of Ishmael and Isaac coming together to bury Abraham offers a final moment of reflection. It is a scene that transcends the divisions that may have existed earlier in their lives. Both sons stand side by side, united in honoring their father. This moment serves as a powerful symbol of shared origin and enduring connection. It suggests that despite different paths and roles, the branches of Abraham's family remain linked at their root. For modern readers, this image carries a message of unity that extends beyond the ancient context. It invites reflection on the common ground that exists beneath differences of tradition and identity. The blessing of Ishmael, therefore, becomes more than a historical or theological detail. It becomes a lens through which the entire Abrahamic story can be understood in its full richness. It reveals a narrative that is expansive, inclusive, and deeply interconnected. Ishmael's life, from his birth to his legacy, illustrates the unfolding of a promise that reaches across nations and generations. His story challenges readers to move beyond limited perspectives and to recognize the broader scope of divine purpose. In doing so, it transforms the idea of a forgotten verse into a central truth that reshapes the way the narrative is seen. The blessing spoken over Ishmael continues to resonate, reminding the world that divine generosity extends far beyond the boundaries that humans often imagine. And that within the vast story of Abraham, every branch carries meaning, every promise carries weight, and every life touched by that promise becomes part of a legacy that continues to shape history and faith to this day. As the reflection moves into its final layer, the story of Ishmael begins to speak not only as history, but as a message that continues to unfold in the present world, especially for readers engaging deeply with the book of Genesis in a modern context. The blessing that was spoken over Ishmael was never meant to remain confined within ancient pages. It was a living declaration, one that would echo through generations and shape the understanding of how divine mercy operates beyond human limitations. When the life of Abraham is viewed in its full scope, it becomes clear that his story is not only about covenant, but also about expansion, not only about one chosen path, but about many unfolding destinies that emerge from a single promise. Ishmael represents one of those destinies, a path that carries both struggle and fulfillment, both separation and divine care. The overlooked verse that speaks of his blessing carries a weight that becomes more visible with time. It is a verse that quietly challenges assumptions, reminding readers that what is often considered secondary may in fact be essential to understanding the whole narrative. The promise that Ishmael would become a great nation was not symbolic language. It was a reality that unfolded across centuries as tribes formed, cultures developed, and histories were written across the landscapes of Arabia and beyond. This unfolding demonstrates that divine words spoken in a specific moment can carry consequences far beyond that moment, shaping the course of human civilization in ways that only become fully visible across time. The continuity of this promise could be seen in the way Ishmael is remembered across different traditions. In the Kurd, his character is elevated as a model of faithfulness and devotion, someone who remained true to his commitments and encouraged righteousness within his family. This portrayal adds a spiritual dimension that complements the historical trajectory described in Genesis. It presents Ishmael not only as a recipient of blessing, but as an active participant in a legacy of worship and obedience. His association with the building of the Kaaba alongside Abraham reinforces the idea that his life contributed to the establishment of a tradition that continues to guide millions. This convergence of narratives highlights the depth of his significance and shows how a single figure can bridge different expressions of faith while maintaining a shared origin. For readers in the United States, where religious exploration often involves revisiting familiar texts with new awareness, the story of Ishmael offers an opportunity to expand perspective. It encourages a reading of Scripture that is attentive to every detail, including those that may have been overlooked. The verse that declares his blessing becomes a key that unlocks a broader understanding of the Abrahamic promise. It reveals that the narrative is not limited to one line of inheritance, but extends outward, encompassing multiple peoples and histories. This broader view fosters a sense of connection that transcends individual traditions, inviting readers to recognize the shared roots that link diverse communities. The emotional resonance of Ishmael's story continues to be one of its most enduring aspects. The image of the wilderness, with its silence and its severity, serves as a backdrop for one of the most powerful moments in the narrative, The cry of a child, the response from heaven, and the appearance of a well combine to create a scene that speaks directly to the human experience. It is a scene that captures both vulnerability and hope, both despair and renewal. This moment has inspired reflection for generations because it illustrates a truth that remains relevant in every age. Even in the most difficult circumstances, there exists the possibility of being heard, of being seen, and of being provided for in ways that cannot be anticipated. The meaning of Ishmael's name continues to echo as a central theme. God hears becomes more than a statement about one moment in the past. It becomes a declaration about the nature of divine awareness. It suggests that no voice is lost, no plea ignored, and no life beyond the reach of care. This message carries profound significance in a world where many people struggle with feelings of isolation or invisibility. Ishmael's story offers reassurance that even those who feel forgotten are remembered. The narrative also invites reflection on the relationship between difference and unity. The paths of Ishmael and Isaac diverge, each leading to distinct outcomes and histories. Yet both paths originate from the same source, from the same promise spoken to Abraham. This shared origin suggests that diversity within the human story does not negate connection. Instead, it reflects the richness of a promise that was always intended to reach beyond a single expression. The final image of both sons coming together to bury their father carries a symbolic power that resonates across time. It shows that despite differences, there remains a bond that cannot be erased. This image invites modern readers to consider the possibility of recognizing shared heritage even in the presence of distinct identities. As the narrative reaches its conclusion, the blessing of Ishmael stands as a reminder that divine purpose is often larger than human perception. What may seem like a minor detail can carry immense significance. What may be overlooked can become central to understanding the whole. The verse that declares Ishmael's blessing is one such detail. It transforms the way the story of Abraham is seen, revealing a narrative that is expansive, inclusive, and deeply interconnected. Ishmael's life becomes a testament to the idea that no part of the promise is without meaning. Every branch, every path, and every outcome contributes to the unfolding of a story that continues to shape the spiritual and historical landscape of the world. In this way, the blessing of Ishmael is not only a statement about the past, it is an invitation to see the present with greater depth, to recognize the connections that bind humanity together, and to understand that within the vast narrative of Abraham, every voice matters, every life carries significance, and every promise continues to echo across generations, shaping the world in ways that remain as powerful today as they were in the beginning.